Deion Sanders is fully committed to building his offensive line through the transfer portal. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think this is the year we finally find out, maybe. I don't know.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I'm your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We're also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcast. So if you make sure to like, subscribe, follow me, give me 5 stars, I get to keep my job. And who doesn't want that, right? We all want people to keep their jobs these days. Let's talk about Deion Sanders, the Colorado Buffaloes. They are building their offensive line through the transfer portal again, which, I mean, isn't a shock, right? They've had the worst offensive line in college football for the past couple of years. And it's just one of those things where you have to, I mean, desperate times calls for desperate measures, right? Colorado's given up 9. Deion Sanders was sacked nearly 100 times in 2 years. Now, I think there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the offensive line. First of all, let's start with their latest addition, They added a UCLA offensive line transfer by the name of Walker Anderson. Didn't play at UCLA, has a lot of size, very not highly sought after recruit. 6'8", 335, kind of goes with that trend of them wanting bigger bodies. I would say this offensive line is ginormous. If you look at the guys who they brought in, Walker Anderson's listed at 6'8", 6'5", 6'8", 335. Andre Roy from Maryland was 6'6", 294, basically 300 pounds. Larry Johnson, 6'7". Xavier Hill, 6'4". Mana Tamini, 6'4". Zylan Chrysler, 6'6". Like, they are bringing in some size, some girth. And although, and I'll sort of hit on Walker, what he brings to the table, and that's sort of how I view him. 4 years of eligibility, was not a ranked recruit. It looked like he was a walk-on possibly. At least it doesn't show that he had an offer on 24/7. That being said, he brings size, he brings depth, and Colorado needs size, depth, and they need a combination to work, right? And I don't fault Deion Sanders from bringing in. This is now the 8th offense lineman, but I do think that this year, I think we have to sort of evaluate the offensive line experiment as a whole, if you're Colorado, on a 3-year basis. Like, you can't just take it year by year. And you have to look at the method in which they're building the offense lines. And will this line work, right? Because if you go, say, Colorado goes next year, they're 7-5, and they can't run the football that well. Their quarterbacks are under a lot of pressure. And it's like, okay, 3rd year in a row, we've built our offense line through the portal outside of Jordan Seaton. He's probably going to be the one remaining starter, and unless someone else dazzles in fall camp. But I would say there's only going to be one starter from last year. So you're in a situation where every single year, right, because next year will be 2020, or I guess 2026 will be Seaton's last year. Do you really want to be in a situation where every year you're bringing in 4 to 5 new offensive linemen? I just don't think that's sustainable, and it's proven to not be sustainable, right? Colorado has yet to have a successful offensive line. They did bring in Chauncey Gooden, who big-bodied. He's a recruit, 4-star, 6'4", 320. They brought in Carday Smith, a little bit undersized. He was a 4-star recruit, and those guys are probably going to get an opportunity at some point, but I would imagine they're going to be reserves at first, and they're going to go lean on the veterans. And my question about this method is, say it works, right? Do we try this again? Now, I think some of you are going to be like, oh, these guys have multiple years of eligibility, and some of them do, right? And that's a good thing. But I think Colorado's best bet is recruiting and developing and sort of mixing in transfers here or there, right? I think the offensive line, like, I'm looking at the depth chart from the bowl game, and it was Tyler Brown at right tackle, Kareem Harden at right guard, Cash Cleveland at center, Justin Mayers at left guard, Jordan Seaton at left tackle. And then even if you look at the 2D, Ben Rensnick, right guard was the backup was Tyler Brown, backup center was Hank Linkus, left guard was Mayers and Khalil Benson, and then left tackle was Wyatt Hummel. So of all those guys, there's only like 2 of them returning, right? And I just don't know how Colorado can operate with that much turnover at such a key position, right? And you can't continue to struggle with the offensive line. And so that leads me to my next point of, one, like, going back to what I was saying, I feel like this is sort of the test or the trial, the final exam, if you will, where it's like, okay, we've kind of studied in year one. We just took anyone. Year two, we changed the system up a little bit. Still didn't get the result we wanted, right? Colorado was still one of the worst offensive line in college football, pass blocking, run blocking. And now it's like, okay, we're going to try it one more time. We're bringing in big, experienced bodies. And who knew bringing in experienced people might be a good idea. But I think Colorado is investing in the offensive line in that way. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we are putting all this together. Does it work? And I think it needs to, because you just look at the issues that Colorado had last year on the offensive line, right? One, and with Shedeur Sanders taking sacks. The highest pass blocking grade on the team was Justin Mayer's, the 84.9. It then takes a huge drop to 77.5, which was Cash Cleveland, who started the past or the final handful of games. 77.1 was Kareem Harden. And then Jordan Seed was 75.3. But you look at their overall grades, because you got to factor in the run blocking. The highest offensive grade overall was Justin Mayer's at 70.2, right? And this is obviously, you don't want to, PFF isn't the Bible, but when your offense line is that inconsistent to where it's like tough to really count on them, it's tough, right? You can't build an offensive line or build an offense and expect your offensive line to just be disastrous and still win games, right? They gave up, PFF only credits them with 20 sacks allowed, which means Shedeur Sanders was credited with 22 sacks, but there was 21 quarterback hits and then 106 hurries and 147 pressures. And so when I see Deion Sanders building an offensive line through the portal again, I really think that they should hit the offensive line hard in the recruiting ranks. Because imagine if year one of the Deion Sanders era, he hit the offensive line harder than he did, because they didn't really bring in much. Those guys would be juniors now. A couple of them would be experienced probably because of how bad the lines have been. So you're missing out on the opportunity to develop. And I think by bringing in more portal linemen, I think Colorado's sort of trying to moneyball this thing where it's like, we're just going to bring in so many guys and we're just going to find the right combination one way or another by default. Is it going to work? I don't know. It's yet to work for Deion Sanders, but I do think that this is the best group of portal linemen he's brought in. That being said, I think if it doesn't work, we have to figure out something, right? It's hard to make a process work. One, they've had a new offensive line coach every year. Two, they've yet to see progress from the offense line. I wouldn't even call last year progress. I would say Jordan Seaton and Cash Cleveland at the end of the season were the only two bright spots, right? So I don't know if we could keep going back to this well, right? I've been watching Landman lately, and it's a show on Paramount. Creator of Yellowstone made it, and it's about the oil fields, or not the oil fields, the oil industry in Texas. And it's just kind of like, if you're going to this well, and this well has yet to produce oil, why would you keep spending money to try to get oil out of this well? And that's what this method feels like to me, unless it works. But then again, it's like, is it going to work because of who they got, or was this like, or the method is working, right? I don't think most teams want to build a new offensive line every year. And that's a situation that Colorado's been in. And I feel like this has got to be the final exam for this. I don't know if they could keep trying it. And it's like, okay, this year we got a good line. This year we don't, because you don't have Shedeur, right? And even though Shedeur was sacked 22 times by his fault or his doing, you have to realize he limited so many. I almost said litigated. He's a lawyer now. He limited so many of the sacks. Like he probably should have been sacked 70 times last year, right? But he was able to avoid the pressure. And I just don't know, with quarterbacks like Caden Salter, Julian Lewis, if throwing them out there to the defensive lines that are as good as they are in the Big 12, throwing them out to the Wolves is going to work, right? So all in all, I think this has got to be a true test for Colorado's portal method, if you will. I think if it doesn't work, Colorado really needs to invest NIL money or whatever they have into the trenches at the high school ranks. Because you can't keep the definition of insanity, trying the same thing and expecting a different result, right? I think we could look at it with two perspectives, right? This next year, we could go definition of insanity or third time's a charm. I'll start off with third time's a charm, and if it doesn't work, then I'm going to have to bust out the old definition. But I don't want to, but I feel like that's where we're headed to if it doesn't work. So offensive line, 8 portal linemen are in the mix now. Deion Sanders is clearly confident that like they can make it work through the portal. I guess we'll find out. It's yet to work, but we'll find out. When we come back, can Dallan Hayden, the Ohio State transfer running back who transferred in last year, can he be an X factor this year? Let's talk about it. This episode of Locked on Bust is brought to you by our sponsors over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Track all of your finances with Monarch Money. It's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments in one place, so you could stop just managing your money and start building wealth. They have surprising insights. I learned how much I was spending on food delivery, right? I get a little lazy sometimes. I'm like, oh, I'll just order it in. It's fine. All of a sudden, it adds up. A few $100, it adds up, right? So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked on Bust. Appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, so make sure to like, subscribe, follow, give me 5 stars wherever you listen to your podcast. Help support so we can grow the channel, have some fun, and of course, so I could keep my job. Let's talk about rushing the offense, right? We're going from like one group that has been catastrophically bad to another group that has been catastrophically bad for Deion Sanders, which is the running backs, right? From offense line to running backs. And I do think that's why Colorado has been, when they struggled last year, I think it's because teams were more physical with them and made them one-dimensional and took away the one dimension that they were good at, right? BYU had Shedeur confused, right? There's a video on Well Off Media where he was like, I don't know what they're doing, right? And it's like, you know what would have helped like prevent that? Or you know what would have helped sort of limit the confusion or limit what BYU could do on defense? If you had a rushing attack, right? Colorado's leading rusher of the Deion Sanders era is back in the portal, Isaiah Gustav. He's a guy who I think a lot of people are a little hard on him because he left the program for some money. But if you look at by the numbers, 384 yards for 4 touchdowns on 4.5 yards per carry, he's the best running back of the Deion Sanders era. Dylan Edwards had 321 yards, 4.2 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. He was the leading rusher in Deion's first year, Coach Prime's first year. The running backs have been a non-factor in the run game, the pass game, and blocking, right? So they're pretty much just taking up space out there. And there's so many issues to go with this, right? The offense line's been putrid, right? I talked about the run blocking game. Nobody had a good run blocking grade last year for Colorado. They were the least effective running team in college football. There was teams who solely ran the air raid who ran the ball better than them. So you have to, if you're Colorado and you want to succeed moving forward, you have to have a good run game. And how do you do that? Well, you have to have a running back step up. And I think Colorado has a decent stable of backs, right? I liked what I saw from Michael Welch. I liked what I saw from DeKalen Taylor, the Incarnate Word transfer at his time in San Antonio. Dallan Hayden, I wasn't super impressed with. He had one of the lower grades overall, 196 yards, 3.1 yards per carry, 1 touchdown on the year. He was a 2.2 yards after contact guy, which I think one of the big differences that I saw, I think it was in a Well Off Media video, I think it was Marshall Faulk talking about, was that the running backs were struggling to run through contact, right? It was like as soon as they got hit, they stopped churning the legs and they were just like accepting their fate. It's like, okay, I'm getting tackled now. And it's one of those things where I'm not pretending like I would know how to coach running backs up, but maybe they haven't had proper coaching at running back the past couple of years, right? And for them to sort of have that issue where it's like, okay, they get hit and it's over, that's clearly an issue, right? I think as a unit, they need to commit to running the game or to running the ball, which is on Pat Sherman, whoever's at quarterback, to not audible out of those plays. And so I think there's a lot of hopes for Dallan Hayden, right? He was the guy in the spring game that I think they leaned on the most. He was the guy that, for the most part, you could tell that they wanted him to tote the rock, right? And I'm pulling up the spring game stats right now. You as a fan should want someone to figure it out, right? In the spring game, he had 4 carries for 29 yards, 7.3 yards per carry, which is already better than what we saw last year. Brandon Hood was the next leading rusher, which he's now at UMass. And then that was it, right? It was that was the running backs. They also gave carries to Christian Soren, 4 for 11, and Titus Bautista, 5 for 13, right? So Dallan Hayden clearly is the lead back. I would say probably Michael Welch didn't play. I liked what I saw from him. But I do think Dallan Hayden has the combo of power and speed that just hasn't been tapped into, right? We saw it at his film at Ohio on his film at Ohio State. And I'll pull up the numbers. Like there were games at Ohio State where when Colorado first landed him, I was like, okay, this guy's gonna be 1,000-yard rusher. Like I thought for certain, but it hasn't happened yet, right? Against Purdue, 11 carries for 76 yards, 6.9 yards per carry and a touchdown. Like that was huge. The year before against Maryland, 26 for 146. The week before at Indiana, 19 for 102. A couple weeks before that, 14 for 70 against Toledo early in the season, 17 for 108, right? He had 3 touchdowns against Maryland. So there's proof that Dallan Hayden could be that guy. And I don't know if it was a combination of the offense line being poor and maybe some technique issues that were holding him back. But I think with a better offense line, with one of the best running backs of all time, tutoring him, coaching him, sculpting. I don't know why I couldn't get the P out there. Pause. Sculpting him into what he should be. I think we're going to see a new Dallan Hayden, right? I wasn't impressed with him last year, but I do think there was a lot of exterior factors that were just holding him and the rest of the running backs back. And so I think it's one of those things where a change of scenery in a way, because I feel like they're going to commit to the run game more. They've said it. They're going to run the ball. They're going to tote the rock. I think we're going to see a new Dallan Hayden. And a new Dallan Hayden, to me, we've seen him at his best with Ohio State. Now, granted, Ohio State always has 4 to 5 NFL offense linemen. I don't know if Colorado has that, but they should have a better line. We could be seeing Colorado be more physical, which is the nature of the game, right? I talked about it all the time. I did a deep dive into the playoff teams. The teams that went the furthest in the college football playoff all had really good running backs or run games or committees, right? Texas, the Final Four. Let's just look at the Final Four. It was Texas and Ohio State. Ohio State had 2 NFL running backs drafted. Texas has 3 backs that I think will probably make it to the NFL. Notre Dame, right? They were good. They were physical. They were a team that was really strong. They needed their running back, their run game to really figure it out. So it's one of those things where if you don't have the physicality or the availability, I guess, to be physical, you are not going to beat teams that are able to just shove the ball down your throat. Like it is what it is. And that's sort of what we ran into. Penn State, they were also physical. And obviously they had Drew Aller who could sling it with the best of them, but they got there because of their physicality. And I think that's the one thing that's holding Colorado back. And I feel like there's a sort of shift within the walls where it's like, we need to be bigger and stronger on the offense line, and we need our running backs to be more physical and run harder. And I think of all the running backs, I don't know if there's someone who exemplifies physical and running hard better than Dallan Hayden. So I'm expecting a big year out of Dallan Hayden. Hopefully it comes to fruition for him, but we'll just have to wait and see. When we come back, we're going to talk about the changes to the college football playoff, how this could impact Colorado if they make the playoff, and just the future of the playoff and why it keeps changing. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, making me your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so we can have some fun. I can keep my job, and you could get all your Buffs coverage whenever you need it. Let's talk about the college football playoff. So if you guys didn't know, we have a perfect imperfect situation in college football, which is the college football playoff bracket, right? It started with 4, and it was supposed to be the 4 best teams. And then we ran into this issue of like, is it the best teams or is it the deserving teams? Is it the strength of schedule? Is it the eye test? And it got really complicated. And then teams got left out, right? And we knew it was going to happen, right? There's, first of all, back in the day, there was 5 Power 5 conferences. So automatically one Power 5 champion, assuming they were worthy, was going to get left out. That was one thing. 2, we had limited opportunities, and I think the past was carrying over too much, right? Like, I think we'd look at like a group of 5 team like Cincinnati and be like, you know what, they suck. They got blown out. And so now it's like, okay, well, I think whether people wanted to admit it or not, I think in the back of people's minds, it was like, oh, Cincinnati didn't do good. We shouldn't allow this team to make the playoffs. So they expanded it to 12, and they had the system where the top four conference champions got a bye, and it was like, okay, that's confusing, right? But then everybody else was seeded, and it's like, okay, I don't like this. And then now it's like, okay, there is no seeding, right? There's no seeding. That'd be crazy. You just pick your opponent. There's no automatic bid, right? So this is the big change for next year. Still going to be 12 teams, but it's going to be, they're just going to seed the teams from 1 to 12. So even if, say, you win the conference championship, it doesn't mean you're going to be a top 4 seed, right? So a team like, I don't know, say Indiana won last year, Georgia, for instance, they won the conference championship, and they were one of the best 4 conference champions. That being said, they had just lost their starting quarterback. And so I think in most cases that probably would have been held against them. Shout out to Florida State. And so we're heading into a year where anyone could be any seed, right? So Notre Dame could be the number 1 seed. They're probably the biggest winner of this. How does this affect Colorado? Well, one, you still have an avenue, but the avenue, I think, gets a little more difficult. Like, I think at the end of the day, you want to win as many games as possible. Shocking hot take, right? The top 4 seeds are going to get a bye, but it's not going to be the conference champions. And so you truly have to be one of the 4 best teams to get a bye. So if you're Colorado, you really have to position yourself to be a top team. And that means going 10-2 at worst, especially in the Big 12. If you're 9-3 or worse, you're missing the playoffs. So Colorado really has to improve dramatically. I think that it's interesting. I think the playoffs going to expand to 16 teams next year anyway, or 2026. And it's going to be automatic bids for the SEC, the Big 10, Big 12, ACC. And I don't think the ACC or the Big 12 are going to love how many bids they get, but you just have to love to be a part of the dance. And I think at the end of the day, Colorado really needs to position themselves to make the playoff. Even with all the changes, you have to be a top 2 team, right? If you are not a top 2 team, preferably top 1, you're not going to make the playoff, regardless of how much it expands, because it is catered to the SEC. It's catered to the Big 10. So all these changes, needless to say, if you're Colorado, you got to be a top 2 team in the Big 12. It's as simple as that. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, making Locked On Buffs your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. I will see you guys tomorrow. Happy earlier Memorial Day for those who served. Thank you for your service. And I hope all of you have a great rest of your weekend. Stay safe.